John Fitzgerald Hanson, a man aged 61, was put to death. His execution marked the end of a lengthy legal process. The state carried out the sentence. The execution took place on a Thursday morning. This specific day had been set for the procedure. It followed years of appeals and legal maneuvers. The location was the Oklahoma State Penitentiary. This facility is situated in McAlester, Oklahoma. It is the state's primary site for carrying out capital sentences. The method used was the standard 3-drug lethal injection protocol. This method is authorized by Oklahoma law. It involves a sequence of chemical substances. The execution process began at 10:01 a.m. This was the official start time recorded by state authorities. Witnesses were present as the procedure commenced. A doctor declared Hanson unconscious at 10:06 a.m. This assessment is a critical step in the protocol. It indicates the first drug has taken effect. He was officially pronounced dead at 10:11 a.m. This time marked the conclusion of the execution. State officials confirmed the time of death. Hanson's last words were recorded. He stated, "Peace to everyone." These words were delivered just before the lethal drugs were administered. Please like and subscribe if you're new to the channel. John Fitzgerald Hanson was 61 years old at the time of his execution. His age reflected the decades that had passed since his crimes. He had spent a significant portion of his life incarcerated. He was convicted for crimes committed in the year 1999. These offenses occurred over 2 decades prior to his execution. The legal proceedings spanned a considerable period. Before his transfer, he had been serving a life sentence. This sentence was in the federal prison system. It stemmed from unrelated convictions. The federal prison, where he was held, was located in Louisiana. This was his place of confinement for the federal charges. It was distinct from the Oklahoma state system. His federal sentence was for convictions unrelated to the Oklahoma capital case. These were separate legal matters. They resulted in a life term in federal custody. Hanson was subsequently transferred to Oklahoma state custody. This transfer was a pivotal event in his case. It allowed Oklahoma to pursue the death penalty. The transfer occurred in March of the previous year. This timing was significant. It set the stage for the final stages of his state prosecution. The transfer was notably expedited by the Trump administration. This action reflected a specific policy approach. It aimed to facilitate state-level capital cases. The reason cited for the expedited transfer was to support the death penalty more actively. This was a stated goal of the administration. It involved cooperation with states seeking to execute individuals. This support stemmed directly from President Donald Trump's sweeping executive order. The order aimed to streamline processes related to capital punishment. It impacted cases like Hanson's. It is worth noting that Hanson's name appeared differently in some federal records. He was listed as George John Hanson in certain documents. This discrepancy was acknowledged in reports. The crimes for which Hanson was ultimately executed occurred in Tulsa, Oklahoma. The year was 1999. These events formed the basis of the state's capital case. The crimes included a sequence of violent acts. These were carjacking, kidnapping, and murder. The charges reflected the severity of the offenses. There were 2 victims in the case. The first victim was Mary Bowles. She was tragically murdered during the incident. The second victim was Gerald Thurman. He also lost his life during the events of that day. Both deaths were central to the prosecution. Hanson was not alone in committing these crimes. He had an accomplice. The accomplice was identified as Victor Miller. Mary Bowles was kidnapped from a Tulsa shopping mall. This was the starting point of the crime spree. She was forcibly taken against her will. Hanson and Miller then drove Bowles to a gravel pit. This location was near the town of Owasso. It was a secluded area outside of Tulsa. At the gravel pit, a tragic event occurred. Miller shot and killed Gerald Thurman. Thurman's death took place at this location. Following Thurman's murder, they drove Bowles a short distance away. They moved to another spot. This was still within the general vicinity of the gravel pit. Prosecutors alleged that Hanson then shot and killed Mary Bowles. This was the state's contention regarding her death. It was a key point in the case against him. Victor Miller, the accomplice, received a different sentence. He was given a no-parole life prison sentence. His fate differed from Hanson's. The execution proceeded as scheduled. This occurred despite last-minute legal challenges. The appeals were actively pursued until the final moments. Appeals were filed by Hanson's attorneys. His legal team worked to halt the execution. They utilized various legal avenues. The primary basis of the final appeal was an alleged unfair clemency hearing. Attorneys argued the hearing process was compromised. This became the focus of their last-ditch efforts. The allegations centered on the potential bias of a clemency board member. The defense claimed one member was not impartial. This raised questions about the fairness of the review. The alleged reason for the bias was the board member's past employment. The member had worked for the Tulsa County District Attorney's Office. This was the same office that prosecuted Hanson. A district court judge initially issued a temporary stay of execution. This judicial action provided a brief pause. It allowed for further consideration of the appeal's merits. However, the temporary stay was later vacated. A higher court overturned the district judge's decision. This removed the legal barrier to the execution. Ultimately, the appeals filed by Hanson's team were unsuccessful. The state and federal courts denied the final requests. The legal path to execution remained open. The entire legal process in Hanson's case spanned decades. It lasted approximately 26 years from the time of the crimes. This lengthy duration is not uncommon in capital cases. A clemency hearing took place the month prior to the execution. This hearing is a standard part of the process in Oklahoma capital cases. It allows the inmate to present reasons for clemency. During the hearing, Hanson expressed remorse for his involvement in the crimes. He spoke about his feelings regarding the events. He acknowledged his participation in certain aspects. Hanson also offered an apology to the victims' families. He directed his words towards those affected by the murders. This was part of his presentation to the board. He claimed during his testimony that he was not an evil person. He sought to portray himself in a different light. He argued against the idea of inherent malice. Hanson further claimed he was caught in a situation I couldn't control. He suggested external factors influenced his actions. He presented himself as being trapped by circumstances. He stated that he would change the past if he could. This expressed regret for the events that transpired. It was part of his plea for mercy. Hanson's attorneys acknowledged his participation in the kidnapping and carjacking. They did not dispute his involvement in these aspects of the crime. This was a factual concession. However, the attorneys argued there was no definitive evidence that Hanson shot Mary Bowles. They contested the state's assertion regarding her death. This was a central point of their defense strategy. Attorneys portrayed Hanson as a troubled youth at the time of the crimes. They highlighted his background and upbringing. They suggested his past contributed to his actions. Attorneys also stated that Hanson had autism. They presented this as a factor in understanding his behavior. They suggested it impacted his ability to navigate the situation. Finally, attorneys argued that Hanson was controlled and manipulated by Miller. They depicted Miller as the dominant figure. They suggested Hanson was not the primary instigator or decision-maker. The execution was witnessed by several individuals. Among them was Jacob Thurman. He is the son of Gerald Thurman, one of the victims. Jacob Thurman described the execution as the culmination of the longest nightmare. His words conveyed the prolonged suffering experienced by the victims' families. The decades of legal process had been difficult. Jacob Thurman commented on the broader impact of such cases. He stated, "All families lose in this situation." This reflected a sense of shared tragedy, even for those seeking justice. Mary Bowles' niece, Sarah Mooney, also reacted to the execution. She expressed frustration with the process. Her comments highlighted the difficulties faced by victims' relatives. Mooney was particularly frustrated with the decades-long litigation. The continuous appeals and legal battles had been burdensome. This prolonged the pain for the families. Mooney called the process an expensive and ridiculous exercise. She criticized the cost and duration of the legal proceedings. Her words reflected weariness with the system. Mooney commented specifically on the effectiveness of capital punishment in this context. She stated that capital punishment is not effective when it takes 26 years. This critique focused on the delay in carrying out the sentence.